All right, so let's take a look at the last three examples in lesson 8.5, law of signs. So a ship has been at sea longer than expected and has only fuel to safely sail another 42 miles. So we have the ship out here in the ocean, and he can either sail to Port City Lighthouse or Covetown Lighthouse. So because he can't determine the distance by observation, the triangle formed by the lighthouses and the ship is shown. Can the ship sail safely to either lighthouse? Well, one thing that you can look at in this is that we can determine which lighthouse is closer by looking at the angle across from that lighthouse, or at that lighthouse. So Port City Lighthouse is an angle of 70 degrees, which means that this opens up 70 degrees. This one's 52, which means it opens smaller than this one. So that means that this distance from Port City Lighthouse to the ship is smaller than Covetown Lighthouse to the ship, because the angle across opens up smaller than this one here. So this distance should be shorter, so I'm going to call this x. Now if we want to solve this one, we would call that y. Now as you look here, we have, in order to solve this problem, we need to have one complete ratio, or to use law of sines. And we have a side length here, and we don't have the angle measure here, but we can find it because we have the two angles here. So if we add 70 and 52 together and then subtract from 180, that gives us a measure of 58 degrees at the ship. So at 58 degrees, we know that corresponds to 40 miles. Opens up 58 degrees, we get 40 miles distance, which means that 52 is smaller than 58, so therefore this should be less than 40 miles. And 70 is bigger than 58, so it's going to be larger than 40 miles. So let's set up our proportions to figure out which one, or what is the distance from the ship to the lighthouse. So we'll take the sine of 58 over 40 is equal to the sine of, now because we're looking for x, we use the angle across, which is 52. So 52 over x. Now we cross multiply, so we have x sine 58 equals 40 sine 52. And so now we're going to divide by sine 58. So now, since they didn't give us any kind of direction as far as what we round to, we can round to, we're going to just round to the nearest whole number. So as we open up our calculator, we're going to do 40 sine 52, close that parentheses, divided by the sine of 58, and that gives us a measure of 37.1, which is approximately 37 miles. Now we could do the same thing, 37 miles here. We could do the same thing for this. It's going to be the same first ratio, sine of 58 over 40, equal to, this is going to be the sine now of 70 over the side across, which is y. So after we cross multiply, you're going to end up with y is equal to 40 times the sine of 70 divided by the sine of 58. So notice here the only thing difference here is going to be the sine of 52 and 70 of swap places. So as we calculate that value, we're going to get 40 sine 70 divided by sine of 58 again, and that's going to give us approximately 44 miles. So yes, we could have determined which one is going to be the closest by the angle measures here, but to find the distances, we need to go ahead and do our proportions. So let's take a look at the next one. The right fielder throws the softball between first base and second base as shown in the figure. So here's the right fielder, okay, fields the ball in between first and second base. Now he's going to throw to second base. How far does he throw, or she throw? So pause the video, work this out, and then come back and see how you did. All right, see how we did. First thing you need to do is you had to find this angle measure by adding 68 and 40 to get 108. subtract it from 180 to get 72. Now, the distance we're looking for is from the right fielder to second base, which means this is our x. This is the distance we're trying to find. So as we set up our proportion, we need to make sure we use the angle across from this side length, which is going to be the 40. We don't do anything with the 68, so it's going to be sine of 72 over 60. That's our completed ratio. And then we have sine of 40 over x. Cross multiply. X times sine 72 equals 60 times sine 40. Divide by sine of 72 gives us approximately 41 feet. Okay, now let's go to the next one. Quarterback, linebacker, and a wide receiver are positioned on a football field as shown. The linebacker has decided if he should sprint or to tackle the quarterback or cover the wide receiver. Which one is closest to the linebacker and how far must he run? Well, this is kind of like the ship problem. You can determine which one's closer by the angle measure. So, as you look at this problem, you'll see that from the distance from the, let's see here, the linebacker to the wide receiver is going to have a angle measure of 50, where the angle from the linebacker to the quarterback has a measure of 44. So that means that the distance here is going to be closer than the distance here. So if I call this x and call this y, x is going to be shorter than y because 44 is smaller than 50. So we know he should go to the quarterback. So, but how far is it? Well, in order to do this, we need to find this angle measure here at the linebacker. So if we add 50 and 44, gives us 94, subtract from 180, that gives us 86 degrees. So our completed ratio is the sine of 86 over 13.8. And we're going to set it equal to, since we're solving for x, it's going to be the sine of 44. Now we're going to cross multiply. Now we're going to divide by the sine of 86. So as we calculate this value, it doesn't tell us once again how far to put it, but because these distances are going to be fairly small and close together, because 50 is pretty close to 44, let's round to the nearest tenth. So we'll take 13.8 sine of 44 divided by sine of 86. That gives us approximately 9.6 yards. So if we're going to solve for y, we're going to take the sine of 86 again over 13.8 equal to the sine of, now we're going to use the 50 because it's across from y over y. So now y is going to be equal to, if we do the same pattern here, it's going to be 13.8 sine of 50 divided by what's multiplied by y, which is going to be the sine of 86. And as we round that, calculate that value here, we're going to get approximately 10.6 yards. So we knew it was closer, but it's 9.6 yards to 10.6 yards, so it's a yard closer. All right, that concludes lesson 8.5. If you missed anything, you can always go back and rewatch parts 1, 2, or 3.